Good morning. My name is Ling, and I'm from Equitech Collective. It's really good to be with all of you here. I used to live in Thailand, so some of my friends are there for the past year, and it's now I'm in Singapore, so it's good to be back after a year-long sojourn. I'm sharing today about catalyzing systemic change in Southeast Asia. And while the deck is being set up, maybe I'll share a little bit about what Equitech Collective does. The name Equitech is a concatenation of two words, equity and technology. And it's really born out of the observation that we have a lot of incredible tech talents in Southeast Asia. And a lot of us actually have a history of working for big tech, but also have a really deep commitment to make do redistribution in some form. Because we realize that technology concentrates a lot of wealth, but it also has the incredible power of redistributing that wealth. Thank you so much. All right, so let's start with the word catalyzing. What do we mean by catalyzing, and what does systemic change really mean? I'm going to start with this slide. How many of you have heard of, how many of you love planes like I do? Okay, all right. So just indulge me for a minute. I was traveling from Singapore to Thailand yesterday, and when you first get on a plane, before the pilot takes off, there's this whirring sound of the engine, right? And then suddenly it becomes really loud. It becomes like a roaring sound, and that's actually the sound of the APU, the auxiliary power unit. It is the small engine that compresses air and then sends the air back to the front of the plane. So that small engine actually sits at the tail of the plane, and it sends it back to the large engine. So in other words, it is the catalytic engine. It is a small engine that starts the big engine because it would be too fuel inefficient to start a big engine. And that is what we try to do here at Equitech Collective. We are the small engine that tries to catalyze larger scale systemic change. So we have a team of about 40 technologists coming from different parts of Asia, but also the US. We come from public and private sectors. A lot of us have worked in building software. We're a team of product managers, designers, software engineers, and we build stuff. So we specialize in working with partner organizations in Thailand, but also in Southeast Asia to leverage technology to advance equity. This is our vision. We want to build a world where technology can be a transformative force for a more equitable future. And we do this by catalyzing systemic breakthroughs. This means we pick problem areas where technology, small changes, can make a big difference. And two domains that we work most in is healthcare and education. So why build tech for equity? I think this morning we heard a lot about the digital economy of Thailand, and the startup space, which is all really, really exciting. Hopefully, we could really escape the middle income trap. But at the same time, there's also a lot of people who are being left behind in every country's growth story, and Thailand, Southeast Asia is no exception. The 8 million people you saw that's contributing to agriculture, for example, those are people that we actually work quite closely with as part of our work as well. Now, some of you might have heard or have seen this really, really good annual letter that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation publish. They do this every year, and I particularly like this year's. Now, hundreds of millions of people live on less than $2.15 a day on the same planet where during the first 24 months of the pandemic, billionaires' wealth rose more than it had in the 23 years prior. And that's an astonishing statistic. Just during the COVID years, income inequality has exacerbated significantly. And just as needs are mounting, low-income countries have fewer resources with which to meet them. A lot of countries are spending more on servicing foreign debt than they are on healthcare. So technology is a force for concentrating a lot of wealth, but can it also redistribute it? This is a photo I took in Mae Sot. This is a place I spent a lot of time in. It's up in northern Thailand. It's on the border of Myanmar and Thailand. These are migrant workers from Myanmar who are packing flowers that you would see on the streets of Thailand. They're usually used for ceremonies and temples. And guess how much they are paid to wrap these bundle of 50 flowers into a plastic bag? Each pack, they're paid 1 baht each to pack 50 flowers. So they count 50 flowers, put them in, and then they just do this day in, day out. This is also not a stable form of income for them, but they are very low cost and cheap source of labor for Thai employers, especially in agriculture. A lot of them are not protected by minimum wage protections that Thailand affords for most people, so they're paid, it's about $10 USD. A lot of them are paid maybe about $2, $3, $4 a day or less. And this is what a typical community that's not far from the city, actually, not far from Mesot, about maybe 30-kilometer drive away, and this is what the conditions look like. Very, I would say, makeshift tarps, and kids here, they do go to school, migrant learning centers, but they come home to what is really a very basic makeshift setup at home. The good news is that there are solutions, both existing and emerging, that can improve and save lives despite these challenges. But these solutions need support, or they wind up merely as wasted potential. I was telling my friend Tanil that it's really interesting. We see this combination of Web3 interest in digital public goods, because I think this is really one underexplored area. Web3 is another source of capital that really can deliver great catalytic impact if it is placed in the right areas. So Equitech focuses on areas where small changes can make a big difference. We build innovation capacity, we build digital product and systems, and we also help to advance digital access and inclusion. So in Mesot, we run a coding bootcamp, for example, for migrant students who actually are incredibly talented at coding, but just never had the opportunity because they had no access to laptops or curriculum. We also work on, a lot of our work is around healthcare. This is one of our, the thing that really got us started was this project to digitalize health records at the Maytao Clinic. Maytao Clinic serves about 250,000 people. They are usually migrants and refugees along the border, and they offer services, anything from maternal and child health care to malaria control, all the way to inpatient and outpatient services. So this is how the clinic looks like. Patient records are currently all in pen and paper, and they are stored in these warehouses. There are often a lot of transcription errors and data loss as a result of all of this existing on pen and paper. It is incredibly, if any one of you have actually maybe run a hospital or built a clinic, IT systems are expensive. It's unclear why, but in the US, for example, it costs about $200 million to set up an IT system in a hospital. Certainly, they're not going to be in Thailand serving populations here because it's not commercially viable. So oftentimes, these clinics end up with this kind of system. You have baskets of electronic health records. And records do get lost in transit, and so people just have their entire medical history wiped because of that. Not to mention, of course, migrants being very mobile populations, these records don't carry with them or follow them when they travel from town to town. So one of our solutions was to build an affordable electronic health record system at 1% of the cost. So we built this for 5 pilot sites in Maytao Clinic in less than a year. And the idea is to enable clinic staff to use the mobile phones to document records securely and safely. And it's a very low-code solution. It's this one screen of the outpatient department that's currently using this. It's a lot of autofilling that saves them a lot of time. But you can also see how nurses are now using phones to capture vital signs, as well as digitalizing records at source. And what this enables is that more of our migrants can own their own healthcare records, and when they travel and they move, that stays with them. At the same time, it is also less liable to being lost because there are also certain political sensitivities. sometimes records are confiscated by military governments. So having them digitized is a lot safer. So what it took from going from 0 to 1 is a small team, right? So I mentioned a very small engine of 8 people on the ground developing this. We have engineers flying in from Singapore, but we are very, very interested in also working with local developers in Thailand. We've also trained Burmese developers for this project. I think in the interest of time, I won't go into the video. But this is one of the things we do. How do we build for sustainability is we train Burmese migrants, students, to code. And so they, in turn, sustain and maintain these systems in the long run. This does a few things. It helps to keep our systems low cost, sustainable, but it also gives them jobs and livelihoods. So they could also apply for future software engineering jobs after their stint with us. Another project I'll share with you in terms of how we catalyze systemic breakthroughs is to solve the problem at root. A lot of problems with migrants in Thailand is the problem of undocumentation. They are considered the invisible population because they are stateless. They might not have their passports from Myanmar. They don't have official recognition in Thailand, so they don't have access to justice, education, healthcare. So how do we really solve this at root? We partner with local NGOs, such as Save the Children Thailand, to develop digital identity systems. The challenge for undocumented individuals, and there are more than 1.2 million, this was about 2 years ago, but with the recent circumstance in Myanmar, it's probably grown to about 2 million or beyond. Only about 13% of students are accessing public schools. And I remember I was in Mason and I was talking to these students and they're like, oh yeah, the police would stop us. So if we get stopped, we have to pay a fee. It's like a protection fee to the local police. And that's just because they don't have documentation. There's a lot of barriers. And so what we've worked on is a more tech-enabled pathway to documentation by really going from awareness to data collection, legal consultations, all the way to applying for official documentation for these students. And it's a 3-part process. We built a tech stack to both triage, to case manage, and to identify these students over time so that their records also carry with them. A lot of them don't even have birth certificates because in Thailand, if you're born, the first 14 days, you have to apply to get a birth certificate. If you miss that window, it's really, really challenging. So with this system, we accelerate data collection and enable parents and students to know what they actually are eligible for in terms of citizenship or residency. Through our systems, we also capture school records to enable them to have a much smoother application process. What happens otherwise is that they pay dishonest brokers like 4,000 USD just to get quote unquote fast tracked to get documentation, which for a lot of migrants, that's their life savings. And there's no guarantee that they could get it. So scams for documentation is also a very common phenomenon in Thailand. So I just wanted to really draw attention to this issue because that 8 million people you saw in that pyramid earlier on the slide, actually significant of them, of course, are Thai people, but many of them are also migrants who have very little protection. All right, so this is a second example of how technology can really be catalytic. It doesn't replace, of course, people. It doesn't replace good policies. We still need, actually, good policies are at the heart of it, but it can accelerate good intent or scale and amplify good intent. The last project I'll share that Equitech's been working on is to bring AI to lower resource settings. We haven't started working in Thailand for this one, but we started in Timor-Leste. Our work spans across Southeast Asia. So Timor-Leste is one of our recent partners where we discovered one problem. And this problem is that of primary care in Timor-Leste. So this is Dr. Maria De Santos. She is a primary care physician in her village. She serves about 3,000 people. She has 2 years of medical school training in Spanish because all medical school students in Timor-Leste would go to Cuba to get trained because they don't have local capacity to train their doctors. So they learn medicine in a language that's not their native language. So imagine me learning medicine in, I don't know, Chinese, which I'm terrible at. And then they come back and they have to practice medicine in Tatun, which is the local language. And you can imagine how much get lost in translation and how little support they get. So what happens, right? A lot of these doctors actually get help on a WhatsApp chat group. So Dr. Maria would see a patient and go, okay, I don't really know what to do. Go to the back room, WhatsApp chat group of 200 doctors, wait for a response, and come back to do something with the patient. And I don't know about you, but I've got like 4 people in my family chat group, and I get 10 responses for every question I ask. So the conflicting responses and inaccuracies of responses can be a big challenge on the ground in healthcare. So what Equitech has built is a co-pilot that integrates AI into WhatsApp, which is already a very commonly used platform in Timor-Leste, and it's trained based on local clinical guidelines. And this allows them to, this localization is really important because you don't want AI to be returning things like Ozempic as a drug treatment for diabetes when Ozempic does not exist in Timor-Leste, right? Or even an ECG when that is not part of Timor-Leste's infrastructure. So localization is really important. And finally, it's about being community-led, right? How do we enable doctors to upvote and downvote responses? Because of course AI still suffers from some problems around hallucination, and we need to be very, very cautious around. So this is where real intelligence meets artificial intelligence. We have a platform that enables doctors to curate and moderate and continuously train the bot, so it returns increasingly more accurate answers. So collectively, this raises the baseline of medical care in Timor-Leste. We've piloted this with about 50 doctors in the midst of rolling this out to 1,200 doctors in Timor-Leste. And in the next phase, we'll hope to also make this available for midwives, nurses, non-doctors. Timor-Leste is not a big country, it's 1.5 million people, but only 30% of them, actually 30% of newborns receive medical attention from midwives. So the other 70%, they're born without much medical support. So for countries with much lower resources, AI could be really, really catalytic. Okay, so yeah, just to share a little bit about our roadmap. For the next 12 months, we are working on-device AI as well for remote clinics that have more intermittent or no internet access. And we are also looking to improve the language accuracy. Tatun, until our project, was not part of Google Translate. So we actually worked with Google to include a new language as well into Google Translate. So now we have Tatun. Cool. So I'll just end off this presentation with a few just reflections. Systemic change is really about changing defaults. Defaults as in what is the baseline experience lived experience that people have. It's not necessarily about giving, but about changing the conditions or the air that we breathe, right? And catalytic change happens when these things come together. So this is what the APU looks like. When talent, ties, treasures, and time combust, really magical things can happen. Equitech really is a story of talents who are skilled in building stuff and technology, ties, the bonds that we have with our ground partners, treasures, some of our philanthropic funders that make this work possible, and finally time. People who volunteer at a time. Not all of us are full-time staff. There are a lot of volunteers, and we always welcome more volunteers and developers or specialists in development work. So if that's any of you here, I'd love to connect. And it is at first imperceptible, this systemic change, but then it becomes ubiquitous with time. And over time, hopefully, we can get to what Mark Weiser, who's the father of computing, talks about, which is that the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life, such that they're indistinguishable from it. So hopefully, our EHR system disappears in that our patients don't even know it exists, but they get a really good experience. Hopefully, that children grow up with identity by default instead of having to fight their whole lives to get recognized. And hopefully, doctors can serve the patients with much higher quality clinical decision support with something that's really just in their pocket. So that's us. I'm Chi Ling. Very happy to meet all of you, and welcome to follow us on LinkedIn to see what we're up to in the next couple of months ahead. And maybe I think we have some time for questions or no? Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. And I think a lot of lessons for us to learn in Web3 too, from the stuff you changed about how the technology has to disappear. Web3 also needs to eventually disappear at some point if we want to succeed.